two mayors of Burlington and Oakville. Just want to give you a few notes before we get started. First thing is, if you want to get home to the Raptors, we're going to give you time to get to the Raptors. Do not panic. I thought I'd give a quick introduction just for anybody who's not so familiar with what ECOB is, the Engaged Citizens of Burlington. We're a citizen group that was set up in 2017. Certainly initially it was in reaction to the development that was taking part in downtown, but also about making sure that council hears residents. That was something that we felt at that time was sorely lacking, and we felt it was really important that we see change in the way that the council interacts with citizens. So that's what we work on day to day, and we're just blown away with the response to this event and to what we're doing in general. So if anybody wants to donate at the end, there are buckets outside you saw, and you can join. Anybody can join. It's a citizen organisation, and we are here to represent you and to make sure your voice gets to the people who need to hear it. So to really encourage everyone to get involved. It's a lot of fun. So anyway, on to the important stuff. The format tonight, we're just going to have a nice, pleasant conversation with these two people. And I'm just going to introduce you and give you some, for anybody who doesn't know about these two people, Mayor Burton first, Mayor Rob Burton. His bio is as follows. It's a broad-based citizen revolt against uncontrolled and badly managed population growth propelled Rob Burton into office in 2006 as Oakville's 39th mayor. Mayor Burton keeps tax increases and tax-supported debt low, protects green space in the environment, fosters strong economic growth, keeps community infrastructure up to date to meet with the needs of residents and business, and has cut in half the rate of population growth while doubling the community's facilities and improving its roads. Mayor Burton is known for creating YTV as part of his career as a businessman, director and producer in journalism, film and television. Mayor Burton's groundbreaking initiatives protect the built and natural environments in Halton and Oakville, as well as the community's health, safety and well-being. For instance, the 2,300-acre Oakville and 118,000-acre Halton natural heritage systems, the Oakville Energy Management Plan, the Oakville Health Protection Air Quality Bylaw, the Livable Oakville Sustainable Halton Official Land Use Plans, the Halton Region Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, the Oakville Climate Change Adaptation Plan, and more. That's Mayor Burton's information. Now, Mayor Meed is obviously very familiar to many of us. She was elected as the 29th Mayor of Burlington, Ontario in October 2018. She's also the second woman to hold the position in Burlington's history. Mayor Meed is working hand in hand Mayor Meed is working hand in hand with Burlington City Council to build a city that grows and thrives. In launching the Mayor's Red Tape Red Carpet Task Force in early 2019, she is partnering with local businesses to identify the challenges to business expansion and attraction and removal. In the first budget under her leadership, City Burlington approved the lowest tax increase in the city in 8 years, while still investing in services like transit, infrastructure and tree planting. She has already implemented several measures to protect Burlington's environment, including a new private tree protection bylaw and the declaration of a climate emergency. In her commitment to responsible future growth and development in Burlington, she's overseeing initiatives that will ensure growth happens in the right places and the right scale. On her path to becoming mayor, Maria served as Burlington City Councillor for 2 terms from 2010 to 18. And prior to that, she was 22 years as a journalist for clients including the Toronto Sun, Vision TV, CBC, and CHCH. Chatelaine, there's more. Chatelaine, Ryerson University and more, committed to keeping people informed about the issues and information that impact their lives. And she lives in Burlington, surprise, surprise, with her husband, 3 children, and a Wheaton Terrier called Boston. So welcome, Mary Ward. So I'd like to kick off this evening just with kind of a little wanted the two of you to kind of reflect on that and to give me your thoughts on what the differences were, why they came about, and well, then we'll go on to the future. But anyway, let's start with that.
Sure.
What is the difference between the pattern of growth between Oakville and Burlington? I'll start with the number. Oakville has citizen engagement in its blood. We have a vast array of community groups, residential associations, neighborhood associations, and surprise, they all talk to each other, and they gang up on council, and they make common cause with each other. You know, politics is ultimately about numbers, and the majority is required to stop or start anything. And so, you know, you have to sort of get outside of your comfort zone and get to know people across town in order to paste together enough citizen support and get enough councilors to do what you want. And for some reason, for decades and decades, maybe 50 years, Oakvillans have had that sort of in their blood, and they do it naturally. And they're very picky about growth. There's a very famous Ontario Municipal Board decision in 1978 that Oakville lost, and the board member wrote as an introduction to his decision that, you know, these were not his words, but the sense of it was, Oakville's very prissy about growth. And he proceeded to rule that we had to. Now, life is a lot of fun, especially when irony comes. And years later, that was 1978, many years later, 20 years later, that gentleman was retired, and in all places on the planet, living in Oakville. And I was the newly minted president of one of those residents associations in whose area he lived. And I had been told about this 1978 decision because I had asked somebody, why is Oakville growing the way it is? And I was given this thing to read. So lo and behold, all out of the blue, I get a call from an angry elderly gentleman, upset about the way traffic was unmanageable and all these things. And I asked him his name, and he told me, and I said, oh, by any chance, that's a familiar name, by any chance were you on the Ontario Municipal Board? He goes, oh yes. And I go, I just read your decision. I'll send it over to you to reread, and you'll see why you're responsible.
Well, first of all, thanks to every single one of you for being here this evening and spending time talking about the lighthearted subject of development and planning our communities. So I appreciate your time with us this evening. So I moved with my family in 2000 to Burlington, and we moved here to get away from congestion, to get away from some of the hyper-urbanization. We lived in Toronto at the time. Lots of great things about Toronto, but we didn't want to raise our family there. We wanted a slower pace. We wanted more reasonable scale development. We wanted to be able to walk out our front door and know who our neighbors were and be able to greet them on the street. And when we moved to Burlington, that's exactly what we found. And it's still here. It's still here among each one of you. But it's starting to change. It had started to change shortly after we moved here. And the way that Burlington has developed is to cut to the chase. Developers come forward with a plan, doesn't conform with the official plan and zoning bylaw. And the councils successively said, what's it going to take to get you not to take us to the board? So then it became, in Burlington's case, development by negotiation. On the one hand, you think, well, that's good. They're trying to save taxpayers' dollars, trying to have some amount of control over development by negotiating a reasonable settlement. You know, it appears at face value to be a reasonable proposition. And yet our experience in Burlington has been exactly the opposite. That because the council has voluntarily negotiated away planning rights, those become the floor, literally, of the next development, and we're stuck with that. We were at a 4-hour meeting last night at council for a 29-story proposal at the corner of Pearl and Lakeshore, where the current official plan and zoning calls for 4 to 8 stories. It's wildly out of whack. And so the development industry really takes their signals from the temperature and the decisions of council. And what they learned in many years is that this council is afraid of fighting at the LPAD, which is what it's called now, but it's really the old OMB, so we'll just call it that. They don't want to go to the LPAD. So we'll come in with something ridiculous, negotiate where we really want to be, and then our next application will just tack on a few more floors. And that is the Wild West of development in Burlington. My observation of Oakville, and this is where hail to you and your citizens, they were prepared to fight from the get-go. They're going to fight, they're going to defend their plan, they're going to say if the limit is the limit, we're prepared to do what it takes to defend that. And I can tell you the good news is since the October election, you have a mayor and you have a council who will fight for you.
We were not that different, actually, before 2006. We had a culture at town hall that said, and this was actually in the newspaper once, one of our municipal officials was quoted as saying, and I quote, "We have to give the developers what they want because they'll get it at the OMB."
Right.
And when I became mayor, the election question was, should we, well, maybe just before I tell that, maybe it'd be a little easier if I tell you that we didn't have growth by negotiation. What we had was growth by ducking. So what would happen was the developer would come and ask for the moon. The citizens would, because they're so well organized, would organize enough heat in enough wards to get a majority of council to say, oh, we've got to vote against this, even though the staff accurately were telling them, well, your official plan says they can have it, and so they'll get it, even if you say no. And they would basically punt the decision off to the Ontario Municipal Board and let the Ontario Municipal Board be the bad guy. And they never changed the plan that kept generating this. And when I got elected, the ballot question was, it's time to throw away the old official plan, start from scratch, and build a new one from the ground up. And that's what Oakville voted for, and that's what we did. It took 2 years because of the extensive public consultation that we did, and I've already described the citizenry that makes that, you couldn't avoid that if you wanted to, and we didn't want to. So that 2-year process led to an official plan passage unanimously at the end of that process, and the proudest moment I've ever had in my life, and please remember that I am pretty proud of having started YTV, but I'm prouder of this than that. One of the leaders of one of the residents' associations, when they were taking turns speaking and endorsing a new plan, this is what he said. He said, it feels so good to live in a place where the council listens to the people. And it just touched my heart. And our council has been trying ever since to hear that again. So when we passed our new OP, we now got into a world where our OP backed up our decisions, and our citizens had an OP that said what they wanted it to say. And so when we fought at the board, we no longer had an OP that was contradicting us. We had an OP that was supporting us. And we went from losing 75% of our cases to winning 2/3 of our cases. And that changed our reputation with developers, and that reduced the amount of business that we had to conduct at the board. Now, in Bill 108, which you may have heard of or not, I don't know.
We'll be getting there.
Developers have it appears, begun to have some revenge on us, and we'll get to that.
We'll get there.
So there's some drama structure now. You have something to get to.
So I have to sort of put the question about, certainly when I was knocking on doors last year, I heard a number of times, which was, actually I didn't hear it from the people behind the doors, I heard it from the other people running in the election. And that is, you know, we would say, well, why is it that Oakville's downtown isn't seeing 30-story buildings? And the answer that you hear from certain people is, oh, well, downtown Oakville is dead. Now, is that true? I think I know what the answer's going to be, but does that have any grain of truth to it?
Yes, I think there are several grains of truth, and some of those grains are at cross purposes. The reason we don't have that kind of growth in our downtown, there are several reasons why we don't have that kind of growth in our downtown. One of those reasons is that in the 2003 or 4 period, when the Boys and Girls at the Growth Secretariat came out to consult with everybody, basically, about where they were going to put their urban growth centers, the town of Oakville they said, good news, we're going to put it in your downtown. And that way your downtown can grow. And for generations, Oakville hadn't wanted its downtown to grow. They actually wanted a heritage district in order to try to keep it, you know, quaint and old-timey. And one of the things I later did as mayor was bring in the heritage district for the downtown. So the council and the planners of the day said, you can't if you're going to put 20,000 people in jobs there, they won't be able to get in or out because the road structure doesn't exist and can't be built because of the geography, which you probably could have told if you looked at a map when you chose it. And some cheeky person asked the Boys and Girls from the Growth Secretariat, what are you trying to make happen? And they said, well, we want people to live on higher order transit. And we had a bus terminal in downtown Oakville. It's a corner. It's a corner where 2 buses meet and you can change bus terminals. Anyway, the smart folks in Oakville said to the Boys and Girls, well, you know, there's a GO station up by the highway, and it has trains every day, both ways. Have you ever thought about putting it there? And they went, oh, good idea, we'll put it there. So that's how that happened.
That really, when I looked into this, when we look into why our urban growth centre is downtown, I don't think council ever voted on it. Do you know who made the call?
It's murky. It is murky, but we also have a bus terminal, and we have one bus from outside of Hamilton, which then, to some folks, qualifies the bus terminal as regional, regional bus terminal. So no, there was information reports that came to council. So when we looked up the reports that council did see, it was more of a, let me tell you what we're doing to your downtown sort of situation, rather than do you think it should be here versus the GO station. And the good news for all of us here tonight is that this council has identified the need to review the urban growth center, as well as the mobility hub, which is what the fancy term for a bus terminal is. It's also called MTSA, Municipal Transit something or other, something or other. Doesn't matter because it's not what it is. It is a bus terminal. It is not a higher order transit. So we have brought in an interim control bylaw for the downtown for a year. And all the right people are upset with us about that. So it tells us that we've fought the right fight, that we know what we need to do is regain some control, level the playing field between the development industry and council, and most importantly, the citizens. So part of that exercise, actually the entire reason for that ICBL is to say, what is the role and function of that downtown terminal, given its designations? And what role does it play in the development of the downtown? The Urban Growth Center is a separate designation, and as part of a separate exercise where this council said, our community's not on for the adopted official plan that was adopted in April by the previous council. We're not get that too. Burlington is dead. Look at all the vacant storefronts. Well, you know why they're vacant. It's because the store owners can't get leases and they're kicked out to keep it vacant so that the very people that are wanting to develop those things can say, look, it's vacant. And so we're calling that out and saying that is not what's happening in our town.
Land assembly is one of the weapons that are used against us. The Planning Act holds out still to this day a promise that citizens and communities can have a vision for how they want to grow that's unique to their local preferences and their local needs and desires. And developers, of course, would prefer to substitute their will. And we are in the middle of a fight, and your mayor is at the front of fighting Bill 108, and it's a major attack on local influence on planning. It removes citizen ability to appeal decisions, and if you want to participate in an OMB hearing, LPAT hearing, you're restricted to written submissions. So there's a loss of, there's an attack here on what I would say is an important part of local democratic expression of people's will. I hope that doesn't mean you're in favor of the attack.
I thought you see politicians saying it's collapse so much today. So going forward with that subject of Bill 108, the challenge that we see in ECOP, and actually I'll just mention our experience, we decided some time ago, it's like, we're not getting involved in trying to appeal this, because there's no way that we can succeed. You've got $1 million lawyer up against you, and like you said, the procedures before Bill 108 were very, very difficult. But the feeling exists that, in essence, cities are being sidelined. The cities are being sidelined in the process of their approval. So I was at a council meeting on Tuesday. The council has been working for something like 12, 14 hours already. And that decision is ultimately going to be made by LPAT. So it's like, well, why? You're almost kind of wasting people's time with this. How do we change that? How do we turn that around?
We get rid of the LPAT. Full stop. We need a Ontario-wide movement to get rid of this antiquated, undemocratic body that actually slows down development approvals, costs you more money. So we talked about irony earlier. The way that Bill 108 is being positioned on this particular issue of restoring the old OMB rules is it'll speed the supply and affordability of housing. And in fact, it does the opposite. And I'll give you just one example, very controversial and well-known to most of you probably, was the Addy decision at the corner of Martha and Lakeshore, 26 stories. They appealed us to the OMB one day before council was to render a decision. It took a further 2 years to get a decision, which we then asked for a review of, add another year, and hundreds of thousands of dollars just on our side, let alone theirs. That will be baked right into the final apartments. They got what they were asking for. Of course, the OMB is the developer's best friend. So, but this is the irony. We're being told this is going to help with getting housing supply, because apparently the decision makers, the people you elect, us, and you, can't be trusted to plan our communities. And it's nonsense.
So, would you agree with getting rid of the LPAT?
Well, I devoutly pray for the expiry of the LPAT. and the efficacy of prayer is not yet established in this case. What I will say is there are more immediate things that can be done. I harken back to what I said about how when we had a bad official plan, we lost 75% of the cases, and the council of the day actually was fine with that because they just wanted to hide behind the OMB. And when we threw it out and built a new one from the ground up, our winning record went the other way. And that made us tougher to deal with, and we had more respect from, and not total, but more respect. So you have a wonderful opportunity under the time frame of your interim control bylaw to fix your OP. I'll tell you a story, a fast story. When Burlington and Oakville were little kids, and we were asked what we wanted to be when we grow up, I picture Burlington saying, I want to be a city, and I want to be a city as soon as I can. And Burlington called itself a city in its history as soon as it could. And in Oakville is Peter Pan. Oakville was, I don't want to grow up. And if I have to grow up, I certainly don't want to be anything but a town. In fact, this whole town word in Oakville, we're now the largest town in the country at 211,000 people. But it's the third rail of politics in Oakville. If you're running for election in Oakville and you say you want to change the name to a city, you'll get like 0 votes. And Harry Barrett in the 70s, when Oakville's population was in the 70,000 range, Harry Barrett was the mayor who stopped that apartment growth business in the downtown. He loved to say, Oakville is a city that calls itself a town and acts like a village. And he's right. So, and my impression from living in Oakville for 25 years and knowing all kinds of people in Burlington is that Burlington, I thought, up until your revolution last year, was really keen on being a city and gloried in it and kind of looked down on us townies next door for not being a city. I would say that your best opportunity has been given to you by your mayor and new council with this freeze, inside of which you can start to turn around your primary planning document. Even if we're under a threat of loss of authority under Bill 108, you should still move quickly to get your ideal official plan while you can, and then you'll have a stronger defensive position. And I think you should congratulate yourselves with this. In Oakville, it took us 7 years and 3 elections to go from a developer-dominated council to a green council like we had for the last 4 elections. It took us 7 years and 3 elections. And what took us 7 years and 3 elections, you did in 7 months and 1 election.
Let's sort of throw a bit of a tougher one at Meed Ward then. I have to play devil's advocate for sure. So, what happens, Meed Ward, if the 29-story building is built next to Annie, and that you can't stop it?
Yeah.
Congestion, loss of community character, and it's the new precedent. That is the biggest problem. It becomes, so Addie was 26, so that was the tallest building in Burlington, definitely the tallest building downtown. And then several months later, of course, now we have one that's 3 stories higher than that. So until we are able to stop the LPAT dead in its tracks, and we're the only province in the country, by the way, that has one, and somehow communities get built in Vancouver and Edmonton and Winnipeg and Quebec. They don't have an LPAT. They trust their citizens and councils to responsibly plan their communities. So we're all ready to grow up on that. I think the whole province is mostly ready, except for the people who happen to hold office at the provincial level right now. I think the citizens are ready to be the masters of their own destiny, and not just in Burlington. I hear it from people across the province, and the good news for me in that is that the provincial government may not listen to one mayor or two mouthy mayors, but they'll listen to you because you elect them and you unelect them. So that's how we got the rollbacks of Bill 66 to stay out of the Greenbelt. You spoke up, and we amplified that voice. And so even the recent change to, the retroactive cuts in year to health, that was you. So I will always believe in the power of communities to stop bad government policy. And in fact, it's the only thing that's ever stopped bad government policy, is you people in this room.
I second your call for revolution.
The next things on the horizon, talking about the province, is amalgamation. We don't know if it's going to happen. There's certainly a fear that is out and about. What chance do you think this is likely to happen, or do you think it's a maybe, but hopefully not?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well,
all right. Imagine that you're a minister of municipal affairs. Okay? And imagine that you were once the mayor of a small town of 20,000 people. And in your small town of 20,000, your dominant problem was my residents want stuff and they don't want to pay for it, or at least they don't want to pay taxes, and my job is saying no. Okay? So imagine and imagine furthermore that you're 18 when you're mayor of this small town, because there was a mayor who was mayor of Brockville at the age of 18 and is now the minister of municipal affairs. So, and let's say that somebody has persuaded you, and maybe it's the Premier's office, that you need to study the concept of merging the two-tier municipal structures around the province. There's 6 of us and 2 counties, but let's just talk about the regional municipalities. So you're gonna study this. So now, what would you do? Would you go out and hire, as a special advisor, one person with a long track record in favor of municipal consolidations, and another advisor with a long track record of sticking up for local control and keeping cities and towns at a human scale so that people can know and talk to their representatives in the grocery store and the coffee shop line, and then set the 2 of them out there to do a kind of cross-check of the proposition? Would you do it that way? Or would you find, which would be sort of, send out Tweedledee and Tweedledum, all right? Our minister chose 2 people of equally fervent belief that everything should be consolidated. So he went and got Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. and their proposition was that they don't have very much time. When I met the minister last August, he said to a group of us, I don't really believe in this extensive, overdone public consultation that the last government used to do, where they'd go all over the province and ask everybody before they made a decision. I said, well, what do you like to do? He said, I like to make a couple of phone calls and then make a decision. I said, well, there's a lot of error on that path. But anyway, that's the path they're on. So, could they do it? Yes. Did they hire 2 people who are ardent advocates for it? Yes. Do they believe that it would save money for the taxpayer? Yes. I gave them studies. The province has been doing this for 50 years and it's never saved any money or cut any taxes, but the belief persists that if you make something bigger, it's cheaper. And at the last public session that these 2 characters held, which was here in Halton, one of them said to one of the public that was delegating to them, repeated this claim that there's no savings to be found. We found a study that shows that there is savings, and I wasn't there or allowed to speak. Mayor Meed Ward was, but they wouldn't allow her to speak. And the question begged to be asked, well, would you please cough it up and let us look at it? And so that moment's gone. So could they do it? Yes. Have they exhibited every intention of doing it? Yes. Is there a way to stop them? Yes. Bill 66 shows that the only thing that deters this government is a prairie fire of grassroots opposition. That's what Bill 66 shows. And what Bill 108 shows is that they've sped up their attacks on local democracy. That we had 2 months to fight Bill 66. Bill 108 went through in 30 days. Right? Amalgamation now has been suspended because they sent the legislature into the witness protection program until after the federal election. And so there is time to organize. Our neighbor on the other side, Mayor Bonnie Crombie, who's very well connected downtown, she says that all 82 of the municipalities that are under this review have generated dozens and dozens of letters and emails of opposition. But nobody has generated 1,600 like Oakville has. And when they send them in Oakville, they copy me, and that's how I keep count. And I am not organizing it. This was organized, I mentioned all those community groups. They organized it. All of them came together and formed an action committee. And they've just changed from social media to a printed flyer that's, as we speak, being delivered to every home. And I know they've started to land because the number of letters going through my mailbox has escalated in the last 2 days in a dramatic fashion. There's about 125,000 adults in Oakville, and we've got 1,600 of them to write letters of protest. And I have said since this started, Ontario's new government for the people can't do what the people want unless the people tell them. So go to the We Love Burlington website and see if there's the kind of help there that the We Love Oakville people have on their website. They make it easy to send a letter to Premier Ford. And what Bonnie tells me is that there's some kind of voodoo doll down there with a pin through its head for me. Even though I didn't, it's my citizens, it's my grassroots that it's not me. I will confess that I'm thrilled with them. And We Love Burlington has formed. I saw several signs on lawns when I drove in today, and it lifted my heart to think that it's spreading. But Bill 66 proves that citizen action works. There are many examples in history where citizen action is the only thing that deters a government from going over the cliff and making a mistake. And so I urge you, speak to your neighbors, spread the word, and decide whether you want to be the city of Halton with a mayor and 6 councillors, because that's the formula, 1 per 100,000. You get 2 councillors for the area formerly known as Burlington, I would estimate. And 600,000 people in Halton. So decide what you want. I personally believe that the best democracy is very local, that it should be organized at a scale, what I call a human scale, where you can know each other and you can feel like you have an impact and you have access. And I believe that the line that we get handed that politicians are bad is a line that leads towards a very despotic style of government that's out of touch with the people, but very in touch with the special interests.
I believe we have some folks from We Love Burlington in the house. Show yourselves over there, okay? So, what I would like, if you can get the house lights up, maybe. I would like you to, anyone in this room, who has a sign already? Who has a sign? Good. Stand up, folks, in We Love Burlington. There they are. Find these folks after. They will give you a lawn sign if you don't already have one. It is effective to spread the, you can sit down unless you want to stretch. It is
terrified politicians.
But it is the most effective weapon. And in terms of, none of us have a crystal ball. What we are hearing is that notice we were supposed to hear maybe in June or July, then we were told in August there would be a big announcement at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. What we're now hearing is that this is going to be punted to after the federal election because the Ontario Conservatives are dragging the federal Conservatives to the depths of the ocean, and they basically said, go home, keep your mouth shut, and don't do any more bad policy. So there you go. They recognize that this is not the direction that the citizens want this province to go, and they will exact that revenge at the federal ballot box. Make no mistake about that. So again, that is the power of citizens speaking up, and what is likely to happen, there will be changes, for sure. And they could, if they were smart, start with the low-hanging fruit. Mississauga has asked for many years and presented solid evidence for why they should be single-tier. They may go there. Niagara, if anybody reads the papers about Niagara, is a disaster. Gives every politician of that name. And so there need to be some things that are changed there. And when the Premier was actually in Burlington for a breakfast not so long ago, he mentioned those things as potential opportunities in their discussion around regional review. The fact that he did not mention Halton doesn't give us a get-out-of-jail card at all. So keep the feet to the fire, keep writing, keep talking, because they will have to do something here too. We don't know what that is.
I promise you, Oakville loves being Oakville. People work hard to be able to get to Oakville. And once they get there, they think they've gotten a valuable thing to be in Oakville. And the people who participate in destroying Oakville will never win an election again in their lives. And the We Love Oakville folks have built such an army already that both of our MPPs know that they're staring their fate in the face if they don't stop this. But we need at least 15 members of the government caucus to be frightened of their future if we're going to deter this attack on local democracy. I love the irony that they're de-amalgamating Mississauga, even as they talk about amalgamating others.
So, going on to the other implications and looking more into the future of our two cities, or city and town, I'm sorry. I apologise to everybody in my film. What do you see as the main challenges? And we're not necessarily talking about development now, but what are the things that you see on the horizon that you kind of correct over the next decade?
Well, development, top three things. Development, and development. And here's why. Until we get that right, until we are masters of our own communities, until we decide where and how much growth goes. You can send us home and save $1 million or so on your council. We have to regain control of planning our communities, and so we're going to fight it on every front. So yes, we've got our interim control bylaw. Yes, we'll redo our official plan. Yes, we will look at whether it makes any sense at all to have our bus terminal designated a mobility hub, or whether it makes far more sense to put that at the GO station. We will do all of those things. We will fight for what we believe in at the LPAT/OMB. But ultimately, until we as a province kick the LPAT to the curb and say whatever usefulness this body had when it was started about 100 years ago to help, ironically, put rail lines through communities, that's what the genesis of the OMB was. It has well outlived its usefulness.
Isn't that perfect? It was created to railroad railroads through communities. Now it's being used to railroad growth through communities.
Exactly. So But development is related to everything, and so I'm not being facetious when I say those are the top three issues. It's related to traffic congestion, which was the second biggest concern that I heard and others heard during the election. It's related to your taxes, and this is another problem with Bill 108. Growth pays, through development charges and other tools, about 80% of the cost of growth. Who picks up the other 20%? You do. And so we have a situation right next door to us in Milton. They are the fastest growing community in Canada. You would think they're rolling in new tax dollars and development charges, then they're off to the races with fat coffers of money. And in fact, their most recent tax increase this year was 8%. 8%. To build the new community centers that are required, to build the road infrastructure, to do all of the things that a population, a new population requires. So if we don't get development right, that's what's looking us in the face. And then with Bill 108, the other set of changes is to development charges. So much as growth doesn't pay for itself now, the province is suggesting that to make housing more affordable, they're going to cut our ability to collect development charges, cap it out, and all that will mean is that the profits of the folks building those units will be bigger, the price will be the same for you, and we will not have gotten one more unit of affordable housing faster, but your taxes will go up. So all of the things that concern me about the challenges in our community can come back to the fundamental fact that if we don't plan our communities properly, we are not prepared for any of the other issues that face us, including, I might add, climate change, flood mitigation, tree canopy, all of which are decimated in an overdeveloped community.
Let me give you some numbers. 11 cents of every regional tax dollar comes from Halton Hills. 16 cents comes from Milton. 31 cents comes from Burton. About 43 cents, or whatever it takes to make 100, comes from Oakville. If we're amalgamated, you know who's going to be paying for the new community services facilities that Milton needs? You will be paying for their stuff. And if you still have unmet needs for community stuff, you may be a little vexed at buying stuff you can't have for other people. So amalgamation is a really serious threat. Builders love it. In Oakville, there's one sign in favor of amalgamation on a lawn, and that lawn is the home of a builder. So I think it's nakedly clear whose interests are being furthered by this idea of amalgamation. I think it's nakedly clear who's driving the province right now. The land developers and builders' submission to the province for Bill 108 are indistinguishable from Bill 108's result. So I've been asking the cheeky question of the government, so who wrote this act? And they don't want to answer. I'll tell you another story about growth. In January, the good councillors of Milton were told in the morning when they were getting ready so January is before their budget. They're told in the morning, look, you got to understand that growth doesn't pay for itself. And we have a program of growth that's mapped out until 2031. And you, they were told, are facing continuous tax increases of 89% from now on because of our growth. And they were sobered by that, and they were distressed by that, because they'd like to believe that they can efficiency themselves out of that and still pay those costs of growth. And in the afternoon, they were told that it had been learned up there that Mayor Burton, it was said, was against any more growth for Oakville. There's growth to be allocated or distributed among the 4 municipalities of Halton for the period 2031 to 2041. Now that's a fair ways away. Some of us may not be here for that. But there's 180,000 people to be planned for in that 10-year period, and this is a big secret about development and growth. The decisions for the future are made so far in the past that by the time you discover what's happening, you get told, you're too late, that decision was made 20 years ago. So that 180,000 is going to be distributed among the 4 municipalities. And so they were told, Mayor Burton doesn't want any. So we have an opportunity to bid for more of it. And unanimously, their council said, yeah, we want it all. So the same day that they were told, I mean, there's no words to describe this.
I've lost my thread now. This happens to me a lot. I'll be back in a minute. We do have an affordability crisis in affordable housing in Ontario. If we're, the argument I heard literally thousands of times last year was, well, people will live somewhere. If we are going to build what the residents here believe is correct for voters, how are we going to house, how are we going to create that affordable housing?
The housing affordability argument is a con job. It is a false and phony issue. And we're being asked to give up our local prerogatives in the name of a false crisis. And this is a classic demagogic tactic. Every year in Halton, we publish a housing supply report. We're required to. It's a report we have to give to the province to prove that we've been meeting the provincial targets for affordable housing. We always exceed the province's targets for affordable housing. In the headlines, you read about the really expensive home that just sold, and the reason it's news is because it's so much money. And you don't read about all the affordable housing that's been created. If you go and read the housing supply report on the Halton website, which you can find easily with a rudimentary search, the latest one is for 2017. It takes a while to compile these statistics. You'll discover, among other things, that there's a formula that the province requires which decides what affordable is for a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom. Different styles of houses is a different number for each kind. And you'll see reported there how, and the minimum that you're supposed to deliver to the community is 30% of new housing to be in these affordable classes. And the most expensive one in Halton, the formula is based on local income and conditions. It's around $470,000 some dollars for a 3-bedroom unit is the definition of affordability. And 51% of all new housing in Halton in that report is affordable. So we're being sold a con job. The real story on housing is there's supply management going on. There's thousands of units of housing that's been approved and not yet built because the builders don't want to glut the market. Mississauga has 30,000 unbuilt but approved units. In Oakville, we've got 6,000. The city of Toronto's got 100, according to the latest report from them, 144,000 approved but unbuilt. One of my defects is I have an undergraduate degree in economics. This is supply management. This is a feature of our economic system. These are big corporations, and they want a nice, smooth performance for the corporation. They don't want to be spiky. They don't want to have boom and bust. And they achieve that by having a huge backlog of land that comes into the production system in an orderly way and churns out carefully regulated amounts. I had a meeting with there's a developer who's holding up a secondary plan in Milton, and I asked him why, and it's inconveniencing everybody, including the finances of the region of Halton. And I asked him, why are you doing that? He said, well, we only want to build 250 houses a year. And I said, well, why in heck did you get involved in this one? Because you're holding up, a whole bunch of people. But that's just more proof I'm trying to offer you that supply management is what's afoot here. And all you gotta do is look at Bill 108. There's no mechanism in it to pass through those savings to the home buyer. When we open a subdivision in Oakville, here's what happens. People line up in such droves to buy these homes that we often have to send the police to keep an orderly line. And the builders have boasted to me that they raise the prices during the day as they look at the length of the line. Because we have a free market economy. How else would they price their product? And if you were a shopkeeper and people were lining up for your cookies, what would you do to pricing your cookies? Wouldn't you goose them just a little bit?
So, and just to give you a Burlington example of exactly that. The report that you referred to, the housing supply report from Halton Region, which does set the metrics, the definition of market affordability, so this is not based on income, this is in assisted housing. The market affordability for a one-bedroom unit in Halton Region is roughly $297,000. There has not been one unit in a high-rise in downtown Burlington built at that price. But there's been lots of one-bedroom units built, or smaller, actually. So this notion that building higher and more is going to deliver affordable housing simply hasn't been borne out.
Yeah, they're building the affordable, I should have mentioned, the affordable housing is being built in Oakville. We're carrying the load.
Well, actually, not really. So let me get to my next point, which is that affordable housing is not going to be built by the market alone. We've seen that. We've seen that with the supply and demand gaming of the system. We've seen that with the pricing structures. Even when we tried in Burlington through what's called Section 37 of the Planning Act to negotiate some affordable housing in a major development that's happening, it's already built now, at Caroline, John, Elizabeth, and Maria, 17-story building. We as the community and your previous council before my time negotiated 75% of those units to be affordable based on Halton Region's metric. They sat on it for a very long time, and then they came back to the council and said, yeah, we can't do that anymore, and said, maybe we'll give you 23% of the building at that affordability. And I don't even know if any of those actually came on the market.
We need to go at each other, because we really do build all those affordable housing units that are in the report. I agree with you, you're not getting them downtown, and that's because you have such a lovely downtown, everybody wants to live there.
Well, it is based on land, but just to close out what I think the solution to affordable housing is, because it is a very real issue in Burlington, and it will not happen without partnership and incentive with local governments and providers of affordable housing. And I will tell you that in my 8 years as a councillor, when we worked with groups like Habitat for Humanity, which have an affordability model and a mortgage model where they pre-qualify people to put them in housing, 28 units of affordable housing that was truly affordable, and not just the first time somebody built that unit, in perpetuity. And there are other groups like that that are springing up, that are coming to us very recently and said, look, can you credit the development charges, or can you give us a break on building fees as your contribution to affordable housing in this community? We'll build it, we'll pre-qualify people, and we'll make sure it stays affordable in perpetuity. And so those are the kinds of conversations that we have to have at the local level in order to deliver affordable housing. The market can't do it, and they won't do it.
So we have a vocabulary problem. There's a sort of fuzzy word here, affordable housing. And there's lots of different, it actually needs to be unpacked. There's assisted housing, social housing. There's this, in the Act, this concept of affordable housing, and that's got nothing to do with the kind of housing that we're talking about when we talk about Habitat. That's a provincially defined concept, and and they mean market. When they say market affordability, they're talking about unassisted, not subsidizing people, but we do have we have people in need of housing, and there we actually have in Halton the Halton Community Housing Corporation, and we are responsible for going on 5,000 units of various forms of social and assisted housing. And so that's a separate discussion, and I agree completely with Mayor Meed Ward that that can only be built with by everyone making common cause to help the people who they're truly in need. There are people with such debilitating life circumstances that you can't, in any conference at all, say to them, get a job, because they're imminently unemployable because of their difficulties, whether it's handicap or disease or whatever, or even addiction. But that's a separate discussion, and we have a proud record in Alton on building that. We do about 100 a year of new units in that area for the last 12 years. And as far as I know, we're the only region that actually has a heart and does this. Could we do more? Yes. Is it going to be harder to do with the order we received from the Premier to cut all spending by 4%? Yes. But we certainly have a record to be proud of.
So we're going to go on to phase 2 now of the evening, and which is the questions from you that you've submitted. So thank you for, I think we'll try and sort of deal with some other issues that haven't come up so far. So here's a good one, actually right at the top here, which is attracting new businesses. Oakville and Burton have 2 different models for promoting economic development. Oakville's internal to its City Hall and Burlington at arm's length, special purpose body, which is the Economic Development Corps. Which model do you think is best? And it says we love Burlington. Well done.
So I think there's pros and cons to both models, but that is something that we're reviewing as part of, it was mentioned in the bio introduction, the red tape, red carpet task group, that we are going to make sure that whatever path we go down, whether it's internal to City Hall or whether it's a standalone body, the benefit of a standalone body is that they can sometimes criticize what we're doing at the city. And that's an independent voice that we need. They can hold our feet to the fire. They have an independent board of folks who are, expert business people. We get access to that thinking and that resource. At the same time, there is also an argument to be made that we bring it in-house and cut down those silos. So that is a very live discussion that is happening at the city as part of that task group, and expect to see some recommendations come out of that will say if we want to attract more businesses and if we want to support the businesses that we have now, this is the right path. And I don't know the answer to that question yet.
Anybody?
We had that model when I became mayor. It was a fascinating model. We cut up all the money. We had one vote on the board of directors, and we'd spent $3.5 million up to that point, and they hadn't landed a single economic development investment in our town, but they had burned through several CEOs and severance packages and consumed a lot of food and drink. And it was called the Oakville Economic Development Alliance, and I took to calling it the Oakville Eating and Drinking Association. And I went to their board meetings, and I said, and I'm sorry, this is not a one-sentence answer. I said, I'd like you to put yourselves out of business, and I'd like you to do it sweetly and gently so that you're not publicly embarrassed. And I'm going to create an internal department that's accountable to council and accountable, therefore, to the people, and is not an arm's length eating and drinking club. And they said, oh, we're not going to do that. And I said, fine. I'm not going to give you any more checks. And eventually they did what I asked. And we have had an award-winning economic development department that has brought thousands of jobs to our community and overachieved on the targets that we've set. And remember, I'm a businessman. I believe in accountability. And I could look at that structure and see that there was no accountability, as in, we're writing the check and we get one vote. So
many areas exist where Halton's municipalities agree on policy with the provincial government?
Yes. There you go, one word answer.
I agree with them not going forward with developing in the Greenbelt. That's about it.
Do you want to expand on yes, or are you just happy to leave it there?
Well, I'm the chair of the municipal leaders for the Greenbelt, so you can take it as my position on the Greenbelt. Look, when they started off, here's where we are. I mean, maybe I can put it across this way. We had an election about a year ago. The premier said spending and debt and everything are out of control, and I can fix it. And it's going to be easy. Because all I have to do, and anybody could do it, that's how easy it is I have to find 4% efficiency in the provincial government, and there'll be no cuts and no losses. We're just going to make things more efficient. Come the budget, they add $5 billion to the debt, they bring in the largest budget in Ontario history, and the next thing we discover is cut after cut after cut, and today in the newspaper you find that they're doing buyouts for 2,500 or 2,400 civil servants, and there's another 3,500 also going out of the 60,000. That's pretty much a 10% workforce cut, and I'm here to tell you that you're going to see that impact on services, because there hasn't been a sign of efficiency happening yet. And I believe that every cut and every loss is an admission of failure, that they could not find those easy efficiencies. And now what they've done is they've said, well, we're still going to make these cuts on land ambulance and public health and libraries and all next year. And to stop you complaining that we're going to be raising your property taxes, you cut your spending by 4% so that it fits. You find the efficiencies. And we do efficiency hunting every year. We're the most directly elected people in politics, and every election, what do you think our residents tell us to do? Find efficiencies. And what do we do when we run? We promise to do it. And P.S. in Oakville, we actually do it. So.
And I think it's really important to note that they're asking to find 4% out of 9 cents of your total tax dollar. There's only one taxpayer, so when you count up what you pay in federal, what you count up what you pay in provincial, and what you pay in municipal is 9 cents. 4% of 9 cents isn't going to achieve even what the provincial government says it wants to achieve, which is reducing the debt and the deficit. So they need to look to and it's roughly divided equally, the balance between federal and provincial. They need to look to the 40 to 50 cents on the dollar to find the savings that they're looking for, and not download that responsibility onto the municipalities. And should they go down that path, we will be reporting to you on your tax bill the Ford levy, which stands for Financing Ontario Through Reductions and Downloading.
Next question it's a question specifically for Mayor Burton, and it is, given the real and urgent threats of climate change as proven beyond question by science, will you support, and I endorse that entirely, will you support a motion to declare a climate emergency in Oakville, as Burton has done?
Oh yes.
That's the easy answer.
So there's a quick answer.
Yeah. Drop down.
Can I add a second?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to note that having declared a climate emergency doesn't mean we just woke up yesterday and started planning for climate change. The City of Burlington has been doing that, as has the City of Oakville and other areas, by planting trees, by planning for flood mitigation, by greening our fleets, by trying to reduce greenhouse gases, a whole range of measures that actually save you money and help the planet. So the declaration focuses our attention to do even more, but we didn't just start this, and thank goodness, because we're running out of time.
So let's all remember, 50% of the cause of climate change And we already, on our own, have done everything we can on that front. Our city, that calls itself Town of Knoxville, has set a greenhouse gas reduction target of 80%, not the 45% that you're asked to do. We try to overachieve, all of us on our council. I mean, I told you we had a green revolution, it took 7 years and 3 elections. But so we can do that. And we don't have the authority to force any member of the public to do anything about their transportation and their housing. And no progress is going to be made until people start doing that part. So I'm cheerfully going to declare an emergency in the hope that it will prompt more people to take seriously their role in this. You know, if students keep driving themselves to school instead of walking or biking, where are we getting? Right?
So I'll just do a quick follow-up on to Meed Ward. We did have we declared the climate emergency, but on the same night we also saw council vote not to provide any funding for that. This is a cheeky question, but what kind of emergency doesn't need any money?
So that's not true. That's what we call an urban legend. And in fact, Burlington has been funding initiatives that reduce greenhouse gases for a number of years, the most recent of which was $6 million to swap out our streetlights to LED, which will pay for itself in about 2 years. So, and one of the items that we voted on that evening was for renovating Skyway Arena to make it more energy efficient, to get rid of the old greenhouse gas producing chillers in that system. So somehow this strange narrative has emerged in the community that we are funding climate change initiatives. It's simply not true, and there's a lot that's built into our budget, our base budget, but even in this past budget, we put another $100,000 in the budget to plant trees. We are buying 6 new buses and 3 new handy vans. It's the other way around. We're buying 3 buses and 6 drivers, 2 new handy vans. We made transit free for low-income folks. We made transit free for seniors. Yes, these are things that hopefully get people out of their car, which Mayor Meed is absolutely correct. The bulk of emissions that cause climate change are from transportation and housing. So those are just a small, I could go on and on about the investments that were made in this budget, and that very night was the Skyway decision to invest in that, and what's been invested before. So we will do even more, and we will do it faster. But we take this absolutely seriously because our health and the health of our communities is at risk, but your pocketbook is at risk. It's actually a misstatement to say that it's going to cost more to deal with climate change. If we have less waste, if we're more energy efficient so we pay less for our energy, that saves you money. We're saving you money. We don't have to go out and spend bagloads of cash to address climate change and to put more money back into your pocket. So that's the goal.
But the point is that at your city level, small c, when we convert our lights to LEDs, we save a bunch of energy, we reduce greenhouse gases in the process, and we save you money on, it's another example of how we're constantly looking for ways to be more efficient. But that's at the edges of the problem. The big part of it is transportation, personal transportation, and housing. Like, you have a heat pump, or do you burn oil or gas? What do you burn? This is where the main problem is. So you can urge other people to fix climate change, but until you're part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
I'll just quickly mention as well. Because we've dealt a lot with about development and building, but we cover a whole range of subjects, and certainly the environment and green policies is one of the things that we are interested in. We will be encouraging the city to pursue as well. Anyway, here's a question for Meed Ward and local celebrity, well, Kelly Childs, from Kelly's shop, cake shop. And this is a classic one that you've heard many times. What are your plans for parking to continue to attract tourists to Burlington and Oakville, actually, she says at the end?
So we have a parking reserve fund in downtown Burlington, and we recognize that we're about reaching capacity for the municipal parking supply in downtown. I'm assuming this is referring to downtown Burlington, as we, other than a few neighborhoods like Alton and Orchard, we don't see the call for more municipal supply of parking. But when I was a councillor, I brought forward a motion which was accepted by the council of the day, that anytime there's a new building going in downtown, we should explore buying or paying for a level of public parking in that building. So we called it because we like fancy names, the public-private parking partnership. say that fast. That's the quadruple P, yeah. Unfortunately, we have not found any developer yet that is willing to work with us on that, but we have a growing reserve, and it's paid for in a couple of ways. If you pay to park downtown, you've contributed to that reserve. If you've paid a parking ticket, you've contributed to that reserve. The downtown businesses have a levy, a special parking levy on top of their business association levy, where they pay into a parking fund. And then in your regular taxes, you help to build the parking garage right next door. So all of those sources go into a reserve to build more parking. So we recognize that we need to look for those opportunities to build more, but we're not looking to build surface except as a temporary measure. So you may have seen up at Caroline, right south of the No Frills, there is a new, I don't know, about 40, 50 spaces of parking going in there. So I would have loved permeable pavers and a couple of trees on that site. I think it warranted that, but we're looking at that. At the end of the day, we want people to be able to access the downtown without always having to choose to get in the car. We're not there yet.
I think we've got time for one final question. We'll have to be fairly quick because people need to go and see some kind of game. So this is for Mayor Burton, and it's about equity and diversity. And as chair of the Police Services Board, do you intend to release or make public the diversity, equity and inclusion report? Public deserves to know the positives and negatives. Oh, of course. Yes or no answers, please, of course. Anything else to add to that? Or?
Any other questions?
We can go, yeah, okay, so we've got literally 2 minutes. Okay, I think the other one that I've lost it now, was what's the regional plan for handling the growth in traffic that we're seeing in the region, and how can we turn that around? Either of you or both of you.
Well, two quick things. We talked for an hour and a half about transportation in Burlington under our integrated mobility plan that's underway. The region wants to widen all the roads, the lines, Appleby Line and Brand Street and Walker's Line, north of the QE. We don't want that because all that will do is invite more traffic from other communities to cut right through us to get to the highway. But that's in the plan that we need to be aware of. They also want to shift 15% of trips away from cars to other forms of transit. So we will need to focus on better transit service in Burlington. We've made some steps in that direction, but we need more frequency, we need more routes, and we need some creative options for low ridership areas. So it's both a regional and a city issue.
So the regional plan is to widen the regional arterials, and everywhere else, I have no idea how we're going to work out the scruple that Burlington has against widening On transit, I'll tell you that we, 10 years ago approximately, we shifted from a radial pattern of transit service, that's where every route goes in and out of the GO station, to a grid system. It doubled, so we got, for talking purposes, with a radial system, we would have 50 buses. With a grid system, we have 100. And guess what? That costs more. And we got a 25%, so for a 100% increase in our transit spending, we got a 25% increase in transit ridership. Those of you who are in business will recognize that that's kind of an ugly formula. And the increase in transit ridership stopped when the province, in its infinite wisdom, opened a parking structure at the Oakville GO station. So you do what you can, and you hope for good results. But that is the regional plan, and your mayor is totally correct. The rest of the region's plan is to encourage us to take more trips by foot and by bike, and we'll all be healthier for it, I suppose. But wear your reindeer sometimes.
That's certainly something we can have future events like this we can discuss in more detail. So thank you both of you for doing this. I hope the audience has enjoyed this. And I'll just reiterate again, if you support what Woodcock is trying to do and what we're doing, please do on your way out join, donate, so that we can carry on doing events like this, and so that we can carry on fighting your corner. Now, before you rush out, I've got a couple of things. First we've got a quick thank you gifts for our two mayors. I'll make sure I get this right. Okay. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. You are a bright and lively bunch, and the more you get together, the happier and stronger you'll be.
A couple more quick thank yous. Thank you to obviously the mayors, but to all the volunteers and the people in the Performing Arts Centre who've helped us out with this. They've been terrific. Robert Gow, who's filming tonight, so this will all be on YouTube very soon.